This is Hannibal here. I just finished listening to about an hour and 20-minute, very detailed report from Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics about AEW's business. So I am going to go through the highlights. That report was aired on the Wrestling Observer podcast network. By the way, apparently the December 7th Collision show that was canceled in Columbus only had about 1,000 tickets sold in a 20,000 seat arena. That show is being moved to a Comic Con. Nothing new from Fox and AEW. Swerve Strickland had said they were going to be on Fox, but there hasn't really been anything giving further notice that might actually be a reality. Rampage and the Battle in the Belt specials have been canceled. They haven't announced any gate or gate number from the Wembley show. Obviously, it was down from last year. That's probably why they didn't. It was way down, but it was still decent overall. But I honestly don't know if they made money or not, because they used a lot of wrestlers on that show. I'm sure that arena was not cheap to rent. I'm sure it's not cheap to fly all the wrestlers over there. They had a ridiculous amount of matches. A lot of those matches were multiple person. They had a massive fireworks display, which is not cheap. They brought Sting back, which I'm sure was not cheap either. But the estimate is about $6 million gate, which I'm sure that gate alone would not have covered the costs of putting on that Wembley event. Obviously, they're not going back there next year. They say they're going to go back in 2 years. Is it smart for AEW with their business decline right now to keep going to stadiums? Because we've heard the Tokyo Dome show isn't selling too great. We've heard their Australia show is not selling great. Their December pay-per-view in Orlando only has about 3,000 tickets sold for pay-per-view. So I don't know. Apparently, Christopher Harrington was listed as the AEW promoter for the Wrestle Dream pay-per-view that was in Washington, where it's still a licensed state. 6,373 was the number of tickets sold for that one, according to the documents Brandon Thurston found from the commission. AEW has been sending lots of wrestlers to CMLL. A lot of their shows, such as the Rampage one that's being canceled, have very low star power, yet they seem to constantly send wrestlers to CMLL, which, quite frankly, how many people outside of Mexico care about? I really don't understand why they prioritize other companies, such as Kenny Omega, who hasn't wrestled in AEW for about a year, is back wrestling and appearing for New Japan, even though he's under AEW contract. It seems weird. Like, with how little interest there is in AEW, wouldn't you have wanted his return to be on AEW programming? I don't know. Grand Slam this year in Queens, New York did not draw well at Arthur Ashe Stadium. The cavernous stadium did not have a good crowd. They are getting some sort of tax write-off from Ohio, but it's unsure when exactly that's going to be. Apparently, the rumor is that the storyline Tony Khan did, where he got beat up and the Young Bucks were temporarily in control of AEW. I don't know if that storyline really went anywhere or not. But apparently, he didn't like the perception of the Young Bucks being in charge. Was the rumor? He wants people to know that he's in charge. Apparently, the AEW Collision theme is universally hated. They knew getting rid of the Elton John one, which I guess they didn't want to keep paying for a show with dwindling ratings. They knew it wasn't going to be liked, but I guess they're just keeping the one that everybody hates. The WWE house show, the same day as the World's End pay-per-view in the same town, has almost 6,000 tickets sold, which is almost double that of the AEW pay-per-view that day. And if they put John Cena on that house show, I'm sure that will get even more fans. Apparently, the Fight Forever video game was a big flop. Miro is doing nothing. His contract is still going until 2026. He's making a lot of money. His ex-wife that he famously did that cuck cold type angle with Bobby Lashley with, CJ Perry, is done with AEW, however. Apparently, many in WWE were making fun of AEW signing Swerve Strickland to so much. Supposedly, Swerve Strickland has a massive contract. I can tell you this. I know the guy that negotiated that contract. He's one of my best friends. And he just went on like a seemingly 2-month vacation around the world. So I'm sure his cut of that contract must have been nice. And again, that's one of my best friends. So I'm happy he was able to get that for Swerve. But yeah, was Swerve that hot a prospect for WWE? You know what's good for AEW? Lots of people are making a lot of money, and many of those people are doing hardly nothing for that money. And Swerve was a guy, and I think he's talented. But he's a guy that WWE released. So it's great that AEW is around for people like Swerve that are hard workers and motivated and can now make millions and millions and millions of dollars, where otherwise they'd be on the independent scene. I will say this, AEW has not helped the independent scene because people are making so much money in wrestling now. They want more than ever to appear on indie shows. So like the independent scene is not the healthiest these days. Ricky Starks has not wrestled since March 30th. They just signed this Costco guy to a major deal. Does anybody care about this Costco guy who's going to wrestle QT Marshall on the show? Is this going to really make any difference? Remember when AEW was saying they were going to go back to old wrestling and be like the NWA, traditional wrestling? Well, they got some guy that makes videos in Costco now in a match on their pay-per-view. Soraya Page has signed a 1-year contract extension. Dustin Rhodes has not re-signed yet. Penta's deal is apparently up, but he hasn't been used in months. Ray Phoenix is still under contract, but is not being used. Everybody thinks, including the people that were doing this podcast, nobody quite seems to understand Tony Khan's philosophy of sitting these people out that you're going to release when there's so many people not over in AEW. Why not do the traditional thing that's proven to actually work in wrestling? When someone's going to another company and you're spending all this money on them anyways, why don't you job them to people that are going to stay with the company? Get them over, get the publicity of. I mean, Penta's a good wrestler, and I like him from the time I met him. But Jake Hager, too, he just sat out the end. Miro's sitting out. Why aren't you using Miro on TV and jobbing him every week? Like, it doesn't even make sense because Miro, from his time in WWE, is better known than a lot of the AEW guys. One of the issues with AEW is there's not a lot of people that are over to people like me. I don't know. They can do whatever they want. I just find this weird. They mentioned in this Goldberg has compared Tony Khan to Dixie Carter. Kerry Silkin, who used to own ROH, is insulted how Tony Khan is running it. Apparently, the new thing they're thinking of doing with ROH, since it's not over at all, is calling it AEW's ROH. Why even bother with this brand? Why bother with it? It just makes your TV tapings incredibly long. and most of the crowd leaves by the time you do Ring of Honor tapings. It waters down the product. It's not over. So now you're going to call it AEW's ROH. So it's going to be even less of a brand. Not to mention it gives your company so many extra titles, which a lot of the people that hold ROH titles are also in AEW. So it's so confusing. But like, honestly, I don't see that ROH is worth it. Supposedly the app or the Ring of Honor Club, from what I've heard Dave Meltzer say, there's only about 10,000 people that subscribe to it. Is it really worth keeping that brand going? Like, honestly, the last time it was really over was the period when the Young Bucks and Cody Rhodes and all them were in Ring of Honor. When Tony Khan had bought it, it had already been on a downslide, but now it's just seen as like less than NXT. They still have no TV taping dates past December 12th, which is strange because WWE has almost the first 3 months of 2025 booked. Are they just going to announce that they're going to be back in some type of residency? Who knows? But it's like they're having issues drawing, and it's the 16th of November today, almost 17th in less than an hour. And after December 12th, there's no more tapings announced. So what does that mean? Are you just going to tape a bunch of shows at Universal Studios or what? It's bizarre. With the move of the one show to a Comic-Con, and they've rented out the Hammerstein Ballroom, they might start running smaller venues, which would make sense. Better than getting these really small crowds in the 20,000 seat arenas, having all these fan pictures out every week it's hard to make a product look hot when every fan these days, back in the 90s and stuff, it was easier to cover up for companies, and even early 2000s, but now all these fans have cell phones, and if they're on the side of the arena where there is fans, every one of their pictures is taking pictures and videos in the direction where there's no fans. So it comes off looking really bad. So it'd be better to just run smaller arenas that look packed. The TV deal that starts next year is 3 years with an option of 4. According to the people doing this podcast on Wrestling Observer, the momentum is going in the wrong direction right now. They're going to have to start a real change in the next 2 years before that deal comes up. There doesn't seem to be anything to get excited about in AEW right now. Their TV show rankings are failing and weakening. And if that continues, it's going to wear away at the value of their TV show. The demo rating has dropped more than the viewership has dropped. The demo rating has dropped strongly 2 years in a row now. Attendance for Dynamite is down 20% in Q3 of this year. And for Collision, attendance is down 62%. The company does not appear to be going in the right direction now, and there's no indication of a change. Grandma Daisy, I'm actually working on a Nails interview. Yeah, apparently the game flopped and they're looking for a new developer for their next game. For the longest time, they were saying the game was going to change them around. The other thing they mentioned in this podcast is genuinely what you do in a case like this, where like they were comparing it to football, and I agree with this. You'd switch the coach, and honestly, you'd switch a lot of the team members. There's a lot of dead weight in AEW that are friends of the executives or suck ups, or for whatever reason they have contracts and they're not over and they're hardly being used. They should really just cut the dead weight. Honestly, give other people chances in there. And obviously the people you have now, particularly the ones that you aren't using, are not making you money. So why keep them around? Change things. But obviously Tony Khan is mainly the booker from what I understand. He's not going to fire himself. He finds this fun. I don't know him. He seems like a really nice guy, but clearly, like if you keep if things are going down and you keep booking in the same direction, I mean, nothing is going to change. What are my opinion of Onita? I don't know much about him. I'm not really a Japanese hardcore wrestling fan. AEW is a mess. No interesting stories or characters. The wrestling matches are becoming stale because of watching the same thing over and over again. You summed it up perfectly. So I can't say anything different than that. Feel free, the rest of these fans, please write the comments in the description. I'll be right back with the UFO news updates. I am going to be interviewing King Kalua, legendary Northeast wrestling independent wrestler, tomorrow night, 7 p.m. And I'm working on a bunch of interviews for next week. AEW has too many titles and wrestlers. I agree. More is not always better. Just like hiring so many people in the company is not always better. When you have all these people and most of them are sitting at home and hardly anyone is on every single show and wrestlers lose momentum all the time. Like MJF has lost so much momentum. Moxley lost momentum. I wouldn't even say Moxley has hardly any momentum right now from all the shows he's no-showed this year. I mean, it's really killed interest in him. I saw that people were chanting at the show this week, "Go back to Reigns," and honestly, that would probably get his career he's making a fortune, supposedly $6 million a year, but people don't care about him. The trio belts are a joke. Here's the silly thing about the trio belts. There's Ring of Honor trios belts, and there's AEW trios belts. Why? When has 6-man tag team titles ever been over? And this is pretty much the same company. Why do you need 2 6-man tag team titles? Brian Burson, Sting has signed the equivalent of like a Legends contract with AEW. And I believe they're working on his son, possibly doing something with the company. Have a great night.